The cold way Raphael described his own attempted assassination shocked me, though what disturbed me most was realizing he spoke about it as casually as someone living under a constant death threat would. How did you discover her plan? Because I'm very good at my job. Hope. Really good. After leaving me for another woman, after destroying our family, after living a completely false life for decades, he still had the audacity to call me darling. Raphael, I began, surprised by the firmness in my own voice. I need to ask you some questions, and I want honest answers. How long? A few months, maybe a year, until it is completely safe for me to resurface with a new identity and come back to you. And Patricia, she will also disappear. Her organization will think she died in the same accident as me. They will consider the mission finished and close the case, but they will stay together. Raphael took my hands across the table. The enemy of what? Of mine. She was specifically sent to neutralize me. Neutralize you? What does that mean? It means to eliminate me. Esperanza, either physically or professionally. Her job is to make me disappear. A cover, I repeated, my voice barely shaking. Our whole life was a lie. No hope, my love for you and the girls was always real, always. But yes, my identity was created to allow me to fulfill my mission. And what exactly is that mission? Raphael ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I now recognized as a way to buy time while deciding how much he could reveal. Let's just say I work to protect certain national interests. You're a spy. That word is too simple for what I do, but yes, generally speaking, I'm involved in intelligence. My world spun. What kind of questions? Instead of answering verbally, I took out from my bag one of the photographs I had found in his study, the one where he was in military uniform with other armed men at what looked like a military base in a foreign country. I was in the middle of an international espionage operation. I finally managed to ask Raphael, what happens now? Patricia came to see me 3 nights ago, he replied. In one conversation I managed to record, her supervisors warned her that if she didn't finish the operation within 2 weeks, they would send another agent to kill her too, and then they would deal with me in a much less subtle way. What does that mean? The cafe transformed into a surreal scene where ordinary people kept having their usual conversations, while my husband told me that the woman he had left me for was sent to kill him. So why the charade? Why make me believe you left me for a young woman? I placed the photograph on the cafe table, between his cortado and my café con leche, as if it were an ace up my sleeve in a deadly game. Raphael froze completely, not just surprised, but petrified like a statue. For at least 30 seconds he didn't blink, didn't breathe, didn't move at all. She would spend sleepless nights, clearly tormented by something. I caught her several times looking at me while I slept, with an expression that revealed real affection mixed with desperation. And how did you know it wasn't just part of her act? Because I got a call from her supervisors. But Raphael, I managed to whisper through my sobs, if she's trying to kill you, why are you still alive? He smiled, but it was a bitter, dangerous smile because I had uncovered his plan before he could carry it out and because she made a fatal mistake. What mistake? She truly fell in love with me. Her questions during class were the kind someone would ask after memorizing basic facts, not out of true passion for the subject. There were also physical details that didn't add up, he said. She had small scars on her hands, marks only gained from combat training. Her posture was too precise, too alert. My real name is not Raphael Morales, he whispered. I work for people I can't name. I have always worked for them. Marriage, family, academic life, everything was a cover. It felt like I had just been punched in the stomach. Suspecting it was one thing, but hearing him admit it in his own words was another entirely. His expression changed so subtly that an ordinary person wouldn't have noticed it. But I was no longer an ordinary person. I was a woman who had learned to observe, to distrust, to look for lies behind every smile. His eyes hardened for just a moment before returning to his usual expression of marital concern. They didn't know exactly who I was or who I worked for, but they were sure that Professor Raphael Morales wasn't who he appeared to be, so they sent Dove, Patricia, to eliminate you. Exactly, I replied. Her method involves personal infiltration. And for the first time in 34 years, I truly paid attention to how he pronounced the words. There was something slightly artificial about his civilian accent, as if he were playing a perfectly rehearsed role, but not entirely genuine. You're looking very pale, darling. What happened to you? Darling. He still called me darling. It was the reaction of someone whose world had crumbled in an instant. When he finally reacted, the man in front of me was no longer my husband. Her posture changed, her expression stiffened, and the tone of her voice when she finally spoke was one I had never heard before. Where did you get this? No, what is this? Over the past 4 years, she had taken out 6 targets in various European countries, always using the same method: seduction, infiltration, and assassination. What I'm about to tell you is classified information that could cost us both our lives if the wrong people find out you know about it. I nodded, even though I wasn't sure I was ready for more revelations. I had already surpassed my lifetime quota of devastating surprises. Dove Fernandez is not a real person. And because despite her training, she made mistakes only someone with my experience could spot. Raphael confided that he started to distrust Dove from the second week of classes. Her grasp of medieval history was too shallow for someone supposedly in their final year. Complicated like her? She's not who she says she is, Esperanza, and she's not with you because of love. So, why is she with you? Raphael looked around again and lowered his voice even further. Dove Fernandez isn't a college student in love with her professor. She's a professional agent, just like me, but she works for the enemy. For 34 years I had shared my life with a secret agent. We raised our daughters together, shared a bed, meals, vacations, faced problems, celebrated joys, and he had been pretending to be someone else the entire time. I asked, even though part of me already sensed the answer. Raphael's expression grew tense. Dove is complicated. 3 days after that conversation, I received the most devastating call of my life. Raphael had lost his life in a car accident on the road to Cordoba. His car had burst into flames upon impact, and the remains were so charred that identification was only possible thanks to personal documents found at the scene. Patricia appeared at the funeral completely shattered and convincingly in her grief. I arrived 15 minutes early to the meeting, not because I was nervous, but because I wanted to watch his arrival. In recent weeks, I had learned that paying attention to details was crucial. I wanted to see how he approached the cafe, if he looked around, if he showed any signs of nervousness or unease. They were furious that the operation was dragging on longer than planned. According to their original timeline, I should have been dead 2 months ago. Raphael told me he intercepted several communications between Patricia and her handlers. It was clear the young woman was torn between completing her mission and protecting me. The way he kept his hands always visible on the table, never in his pockets or hidden away, small details that a lovesick wife had mistaken for courtesy and good manners, but that I now recognized as signs of professional training. Esperanza, he said my name as he sat down. Instead of staging an accident, they would just shoot me and make it look like a robbery gone wrong. The conversation had taken such a surreal turn that I could hardly believe I was sitting in a quiet cafe in Seville discussing assassination plots with my husband, but the reality was undeniable. Something I never expected. She actually fell in love with me. Raphael said he noticed changes in Patricia's behavior about a month after their supposed relationship began. Small signs showed her feelings were becoming real. She started to show genuine vulnerability, not just pretend. Raphael told me that for the past 5 years, he had been part of a complex operation that dismantled corruption networks reaching the highest levels of various European governments. She cried in my arms as if she had lost the love of her life. Her performance was so convincing that even I, who knew the truth, at times believed in her pain. 2 weeks after the funeral, Patricia disappeared. She was desperate, crying in a way that was definitely not an act. She told me that she couldn't kill me, but if she didn't, they would kill her and then come for me anyway. And what did you tell her? I said there was an alternative. Raphael detailed his plan, which was as risky as it was brilliant. And when she spoke English on the phone, unaware I could hear her, her accent wasn't Spanish, but Eastern European. Did you investigate her? Of course. I discovered that Patricia Kobalenko was born in Ukraine, but she was recruited by an international organization when she was just 17 years old. His work as a university professor allowed him to travel freely, build connections within academic and intellectual circles, and access information that would otherwise have been out of reach. But everything fell apart 6 months ago, he went on. They uncovered my true identity. Because if my enemies knew you were important to me, they would use you against me. Pretending I had left you was the only way to keep you safe. For the first time in months, tears ran down my cheeks, but they weren't tears of sadness. They came from a confusing mix of relief, fear, anger, and love. And Raphael gave that bitter smile he'd had ever since he started telling me the truth, because at first I thought I could turn the situation to my advantage. If I could turn her into a source of information about the organization that sent her, I might have a chance to dismantle the whole network. So what happened? Raphael closed his eyes and took a deep breath. When he opened them again, he was a completely different man. The facade of the university professor had completely disappeared. "Hope," he said in a voice that sounded both weary and dangerous. "There are parts of me I've never been able to share with you." "Then tell me now." The revelation that Dove Fernandez had genuinely fallen for Raphael left me stunned, unsure how to process it. For 2 hours we sat in that cafe as he told a story that sounded like it belonged in a spy movie, but was completely true. "Esperanza," Raphael continued, lowering his voice to a barely audible whisper. "Hope. I know this is hard to understand. Patricia saved my life by not completing her mission, and now she is risking hers to help me fake my death. We need each other to survive. This means they will live together temporarily." "Yes, but I want you to know that my love for you has never changed." What I feel for Patricia is complex. Gratitude, respect, perhaps a bit of affection for someone who risked everything for me. But you are still the woman I want to spend the rest of my days with. Or where did this photograph come from? It was as if she knew exactly what it was and why it was crucial to keep it secret. "In your studio," I answered, keeping my voice steady just like she was, along with the fake passports, the multiple identities, the documents in English, and the offshore bank accounts. The thought that a professional killer had been living in the apartment my husband rented, sleeping in the same bed, pretending to be in love while plotting his death, shocked me. But Raphael, if you knew all this, why didn't you just run away? Why did you stay with her? During his years of undercover work, he had learned to simulate deaths very convincingly. With Patricia's help, they could make her superiors believe that the mission had been successfully completed, while he disappeared with a new identity. "But there's a catch," he continued. "I can't. It would be too risky for you." "Riskier than finding out that the man I've been married to for 34 years is a total stranger? More dangerous than living with the certainty that my entire life has been a lie?" Raphael glanced around the cafe once more, then leaned in, bringing his face closer to mine. "For this to work, you have to truly believe that I am dead, at least for a while." My heart sank with sadness. Her real name is Patricia Kobalenko, and she belongs to an elite organization that specializes in eliminating people like me, people like you, agents who know too much, who have been involved in undercover operations for too long, becoming a threat to the security of certain governments or corporations. She gets close to her target, builds an emotional bond, earns their trust, and then, stages it to look like an accident or suicide. Raphael arrived precisely at 11, just as he always had when it came to being punctual. But now that I knew what to look for, I noticed things that had escaped me before. The way his eyes scanned the entire square before entering the cafe, how he chose a table that let him see both the entrance and the back exit. The officer who informed me was kind but straightforward. My husband had died in a car accident. His car collided with a truck and caught fire. The remains were so badly burned that an open casket funeral was impossible. My reaction was exactly what Raphael expected: genuine, overwhelming pain. We share a home for safety and to maintain our fake identities. We have to pretend to be a couple. But our relationship isn't what people might think. Over the following months, I learned more about the bond between Raphael and Patricia than I ever wanted to know. Like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories exploring the complexities of the human heart. In the end, we all want the same thing: to be understood, loved, and to find hope that no matter how dark the road seems, there is always a chance for a new dawn. Although I knew it was a sham, the immediate reality was that I had lost my husband. I didn't know when I would see him again, if ever. Dove and Dawn rivers rushed over when I called them. My daughters, who had been furious with their father for leaving me, suddenly found themselves grieving his death. For our daughters, their father died in a tragic accident, and their mother was fortunate enough to find love again with an extraordinary man who, by coincidence, looks very much like their father. It's best this way. Some truths are too dangerous to be revealed. This afternoon I cleaned the entire house from top to bottom. This story of hope shows us that life can change in an instant, and those we think we know may hide secrets we never imagined. It also reveals a deeper lesson. True love doesn't mean the absence of problems, but the ability to find each other again after being completely lost. This story of hope reminds us that life can change completely in an instant, and that the people we think we know best may hold secrets we never imagined. But it also teaches us something much deeper. True love isn't the absence of problems, but the ability to find each other again after being completely lost. She left a letter in the apartment explaining that she couldn't bear to stay in Seville after Raphael's death, and that she was moving in with an aunt abroad. No one suspected anything unusual. She was just a student, devastated by the loss of her older lover. We are two people who have survived an experience that would have destroyed most couples. But we have endured, and that, I believe, is what real love really means. It's not about avoiding storms, but about the determination to rebuild together after they've passed. The doorbell has rung. Raphael has returned home. You can't put on a show of grief because you never know who might be watching. That's why it's crucial that part of you believes, even if only for a little while, that I'm dead. How am I going to manage that? Because for the next few months, for all intents and purposes, I will have disappeared. He will present himself as David Navarro, a widower from Barcelona, who moved to Andalusia to start over after losing his wife in an accident. He told me that he and Patricia had initially settled in a small town in the Dordogne region of France. He worked as a carpenter under the name Henry de Bois, while Patricia taught English at the local school as Marie Rousseau. To the outside world, they were a couple of Spanish refugees who had fled Spain after economic hardship. It wasn't a typical romance. It came from extreme circumstances, two people who saved each other and now rely on one another to survive. Patricia is hurt, Esperanza, Raphael explained during one of our long talks. She was recruited when she was barely a child. I'm going to live with my aunt abroad, and just like that, officially, both Raphael and Patricia vanished from my life forever. The first months of my widowhood were the hardest I've ever faced. The story of Esperanza and Raphael reminds us that behind every apparent betrayal, every unexplained abandonment, and every hurtful act, there may be a reality much more complex than it first seems. The days after my conversation with Raphael at the cafe became the longest and most painful of my life. I knew that at any moment I would get the call that would change everything forever, the news of his fake death. Raphael had explained every detail of the plan during our secret meetings in the days before. We have both faced an experience that could have destroyed many couples, but we have overcome it all, and I believe that is what true love really means. Not the ability to avoid storms, but the strength to rebuild together once they have passed. The doorbell rings. Raphael has arrived. It's amazing how death, even if it's fake, can make people remember only the good. "Mom," Don Rivers sobbed, "I know Dad hurt you, but he was a good man. He just got temporarily lost. If he had really understood how lost he'd been throughout our lives, he would have been speechless. The funeral was a real show." 8 months in which I've learned more about myself, about love, about survival, and about the complexity of human relationships than in all the previous years of my life. I am officially the widow of Raphael Morales, a respected university professor who tragically died in a car accident. I receive a modest pension from the university, occasional condolences from Raphael's former colleagues, and constant support from neighbors and friends who see me as a woman who lost everything, first to betrayal, then to death. But the situation is far more complicated than it appears. Not a single day has passed in these months that I haven't thought about coming home to you. But I needed to make sure Patricia was in a safe and stable place before making that decision, and now she is. She's making progress. She started to express her desire to have her own life, independent of me. I believe that in a few months, she'll be ready to forge her own path. Sometimes life forces us to lose everything to realize what truly matters. At times, it's necessary to let a part of ourselves die to be reborn stronger and wiser. Raphael is coming home tonight, but he is no longer the same man who left, and I am not the same woman he left behind. There's a network of people providing support to former agents trying to leave that life, but the path is long and difficult. Over the months, I came to realize that Raphael had not only become Patricia's savior, but also her healer. How many times have we judged situations without knowing the whole story? How many times have we given up on something that just needed time to heal? We met in different places each time. A bench in Maria Luisa Park, the public library, a small church in the Santa Cruz neighborhood. Always careful not to be seen together, making sure no one was following us. The accident would happen on the road to Cordoba, he said during our last meeting. Patricia is an expert at turning situations into real accidents. She has done it before. The coldness with which she spoke about faking her own death horrified me, yet I understood it was the only way to protect us all. Esperanza told me, taking my hands in hers, "When you get the call, your reaction has to be completely genuine. Every 2 weeks, this phone will receive a text message that simply says, 'All good.' That will be your only sign that I'm still alive. Don't try to reply, don't try to find us. Just wait, and when it's safe, you'll receive instructions on how to meet me. And Patricia." Raphael took a deep breath. Do they live like a real couple?" I asked him during one of our early conversations. That was the concern that plagued me the most. "It's complicated," he replied honestly. This afternoon, I cleaned the house from top to bottom. I prepared, of course, Raphael's favorite dinner and wore the blue dress I wore on our first date 36 years ago. Tonight I'll be welcoming a stranger at my door. Tomorrow I will wake up with my husband by my side for the first time in almost a year. Sometimes life forces you to lose everything to rediscover what truly matters. Sometimes you have to let a version of yourself die in order to be reborn stronger and wiser. Raphael comes home tonight, but he is not the same man who left, and I am not the same woman he left behind. 34 years of true love? With her, I have gratitude, respect, maybe a little affection born from extreme circumstances, but you are my wife, the mother of my daughters, the love of my life. The accident happened on a Friday. I received the call from the civil guard at 3:47 in the afternoon. Of course, I prepared Raphael's favorite dinner for him, and I put on the blue dress I wore on our first date 36 years ago. Tonight, I will welcome a stranger at my door. Tomorrow, I will wake up with my husband by my side for the first time in almost a year. Last week, I received the message I had been waiting for 8 months. Soon home, Patricia has decided to move to Canada and start fresh. I love you. Today, as I write this story, Raphael arrives in Seville tonight, not as Raphael Morales. That man ceased to exist 8 months ago. Not only was I struggling with the deep pain of not knowing when I would see Raphael again, but I also had to keep up a constant front of proper mourning. Neighbors brought me home-cooked meals and offered their condolences. Friends from church invited me to their gatherings so I wouldn't be alone. He was helping her learn how to live like a normal person, to feel emotions without fear, and to build an identity beyond violence. While this sometimes caused me pain, it also filled me with pride for the man I chose as my husband many years ago. Even in impossible situations, Raphael remained fundamentally good. Her performance was so convincing that several people later commented on how moved they were by the suffering of that poor girl who loved Raphael so much. 2 weeks after the funeral, Patricia disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only a brief note found in the apartment. I can't stay in a city filled with memories. Patricia will be with me, at least in the beginning. Her life is in danger now too. Her superiors will eliminate her if they find out she helped me instead of killing me. You love her. It's complicated. Hope. What I feel for her doesn't compare to what I feel for you. With you, I built a life, a family. Patricia appeared dressed in black, wearing huge sunglasses that hid her eyes. After the ceremony, she came up to me and hugged me, whispering in my ear, "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Morales. Raphael was a wonderful man." How many times have we judged situations without knowing the full story? How many times have we assumed we lost something that just needed time to heal? You won't be able to see me. There will be no way to contact me. You won't know where I am. Your suffering will be real because your loss will be real. Raphael handed me a special phone, one that looked like an old, ordinary model. My daughters visited often, worried I might sink into overwhelming depression. And every 2 weeks, like clockwork, came the text message, "All good." Those 2 words became the only light in my dark world of apparent shadows. 8 months have passed since Raphael's funeral. Patricia had managed to get hold of a vehicle identical to mine. We would fill it with organic remains that after the explosion would be impossible to identify by DNA. My personal documents would be cleverly placed to survive the fire, and if any suspicion arose, no one would dare to doubt. The story of Esperanza and Raphael reminds us that behind every apparent betrayal, every unexplained abandonment, and every hurtful act, there can be a much more complex reality than meets the eye. If this story has touched your heart or made you reflect on your own relationships, second chances, or the complexity of forgiveness, please share your thoughts in the comments. Your experience could be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Have you ever gone through a situation where you discovered someone important in your life wasn't who you thought they were? Have you faced the hard decision to forgive something that seemed impossible to forgive? Or maybe you carry secrets that could change how others see you. This is a safe space to share, reflect, and connect with others who have walked similar paths. Sometimes, telling our story is the first step toward healing. If this story moved you, please help us reach more people who need to hear that they are not alone in their struggles. "And what about us?" I asked him directly 3 months ago. "There's still an us," Esperanza replied with deep emotion. Raphael contacts me once a week from a secure phone. At first, our conversations were short and cautious, filled with codes we'd established in case someone was listening. But gradually, as it became clear that his enemies truly believed he was dead, our talks grew longer and more natural. Officially, we will meet in a few weeks. To them, their father died in a tragic accident, and their mother was lucky enough to find love again with an incredible man who, by chance, looks a lot like their father. It's better this way. Some truths are just too dangerous to share. Her organization trained her not just to eliminate her targets, but also to avoid emotional attachments. For her, falling in love with me was as shocking as it was for me to discover her mission. She's receiving professional help. We are working on this together. See you in the next story, and remember, your story matters too. No, Mom, something doesn't add up in this whole story, Dove insisted, pulling out a notebook where she had been jotting down notes. I've been thinking about it a lot, and Dad's behavior doesn't make sense. He stood up and started pacing the kitchen, just like he used to do whenever he was processing complicated information. I watched as their faces changed from confusion to disbelief and finally to anger. 21 years, shouted Dawn Rivers. The neighbors, those same people who had been our friends for so many years, now watched me with a mix of sympathy and morbid curiosity whenever I went out shopping. I could hear their whispers behind my back. Poor Esperanza, left by a young girl. How humiliating to be alone at her age. 2 months in which I lost 22 pounds without trying, developed chronic insomnia that kept me awake until 4 a.m., and started talking to myself in that house that now felt like a mausoleum filled with memories. My daily routine had been reduced to a monotonous and painful cycle. However, there was something different about his walk that day. Slower, heavier, as if each step took immense effort. When he entered the kitchen, I knew immediately that something was very wrong. Raphael was carrying a small brown leather suitcase, the same one he used on our early travels together. I asked her. Dove smiled for the first time in weeks. Mom, I'm a lawyer. I have my methods, and besides, we live in the internet age. It's amazing how much information you can find about someone just by their full name. This tradition had been upheld for more than 20 years since the girls married and started their own families. As I stirred the rice, I heard the footsteps of Raphael in the hallway. After 34 years of marriage, I knew the sound of his shoes on the terracotta tiles all too well. Raphael never trembled. He was a man who exuded confidence, a respected university professor, someone who had faced crowds of hundreds without a hint of nervousness. "What's wrong, my love?" I asked, though part of me already knew I didn't want to hear the answer. Have you ever wondered what it's like to face the truth that your life has been an illusion at 55 years old? I'm Hope Morales, and this is the most painful and surprising story I've ever experienced. 34 years of marriage, raising 2 daughters together, a house full of memories, a life built brick by brick day after day, and he was leaving me for a girl who could be his granddaughter. "Where did you meet her?" I whispered, surprised I still had a voice at all. It wasn't just the rejection that tormented me, but the complete lack of understanding about what had happened. A man who had been predictable, methodical, and almost monotonous in his routine for 34 years, suddenly transformed into a whimsical young man capable of ruining a family on a whim. "Mom, we need to find out who this Dove really is," she said, using the same name as the girl due to a cruel twist of fate. "Why, dear? It'll just cause more pain," I replied, unconsciously stirring my 4th cup of coffee that morning. I already felt humiliated enough. Raphael ran his free hand through his hair, the gesture he always made when he felt nervous or uneasy. His hair had more gray than when we got married, but it still fell over his forehead the way I had found so attractive in our youth. As a lawyer, she had that analytical mind that allowed her to spot patterns where others only saw chaos. The family photos on the walls showing us happy in times that now seemed like a distant past. Even the scent of his cologne lingered in the closet, mocking my pain. The plates I had set for 4 stared back at me from the dining table, silent witnesses to the humiliation I had just endured. The paella was unfinished. The rice had begun to stick to the bottom of the pan. It was at that moment that everything really hit me. "I'm sorry. I truly am." And then he left, just like that. I heard the jingle of his keys in the front door lock, followed by the sound of his car engine starting, and then silence. I was left alone in that house that suddenly felt vast and empty. Raphael, do you realize what you're saying? That young woman could be our granddaughter. I know, he said, and for the first time since he came into the kitchen, he looked me straight in the eyes. At the university where I teach, she's my medieval history student. Of course, a college professor falling for his student, a pathetic, predictable cliché. But the pain in my chest was far too real to be a cliché. It felt like someone had stabbed me and was slowly twisting the knife. Your student, I repeated in disbelief. Think about it, Mom. Dad has never been impulsive. Not once in his life has he made an important decision without analyzing it for months. Remember when he decided to switch universities? He took 2 years to weigh the pros and cons. And when we bought this house, we visited 40 different properties before making a decision. I've already rented an apartment near the university. And so, on an ordinary October Sunday, as the aroma of paella drifted through the air and the sun began to set over Seville, my life came crashing down. Mom, you need to eat something, Dawn Rivers insisted every time she came over, bringing containers filled with homemade food that I barely tasted. You can't go on like this, Mom. You don't deserve to destroy yourself because of him. But I just couldn't help it. Even when choosing a restaurant for our anniversaries, he'd spend weeks reading reviews. Waking up late after only 2 or 3 hours of restless sleep, making coffee that I didn't even want to drink, sitting on the terrace, staring at the garden where we once grew our geraniums and jasmine together, waiting for the hours to pass until another endless night arrived. The wooden spoon I was holding slipped from my fingers and fell to the floor with a dry thud that echoed in the silence following his words. What do you mean you've met someone? I managed to say, though my voice sounded strange even to me. We spent the rest of the morning organizing our research. The word research felt over the top and dramatic, like we were main characters in one of those crime shows I used to watch afternoons to pass the time. But for the first time in 2 months, I had something to do, a goal that wasn't just about enduring pain. The next day, on a cloudy Wednesday in December, we parked my old Seat Ibiza in front of the Faculty of Philosophy and Letters at the University of Seville. Dove had found out that the young woman would be leaving Raphael's class at 2:30 after her late medieval history seminar. Are you sure you want to do this, Mom? My daughter asked, noticing my hands tremble slightly as I gripped the steering wheel. No, I agreed, but I feel like I have to do it. Believe me, I know, but I couldn't help it. Esperanza, it's different. She makes me feel alive in a way I haven't felt in years. Those words struck my heart like another knife. He hadn't felt alive with me. The last years of our marriage had been a slow agony for him. I asked, feeling, for the first time in months, a spark of curiosity that wasn't tied to pain. We're going to discreetly investigate this young woman, my daughter said, opening her notebook. I've already started gathering some basic information. Her name is Dove Fernandez. She's originally from Madrid. I had officially become the betrayed wife whose husband had left her for a younger woman. Just another detail for the gossip magazines that my neighbor Carmen loved to read. The exquisite aroma of saffron and the cooking mixture filled the house, blending with the scent of jasmine climbing the patio walls. I had set the table for 4, as I always did on Sundays. I was expecting the arrival of our daughters, Dove and Dawn Rivers, who were coming with their families for a family lunch. She was right. Raphael was the most meticulous and calculating man I had ever known. He even planned our honeymoon 6 months ahead, including detailed itineraries and bookings for every day. So what do you suggest? I sat down on one of the kitchen chairs and began to cry like I hadn't since my mother passed away. I cried for the 34 years I thought I had lived in a happy marriage. I cried for the humiliation of being left for a girl who could be my granddaughter. I cried for the loneliness that stretched ahead like an endless desert. His eyes, those brown eyes that had captivated me when I was 19, avoided mine with a determination that froze my blood. He said my name in a voice that sounded strange, as if it was the first time he had ever spoken it. "I need to tell you something." His hands trembled slightly as he held the suitcase's handle. The bed had turned into an ocean of loneliness where my husband's warm body once lay. The house I had always considered my refuge now felt like a prison. Every corner was filled with memories that tormented me. The armchair where Raphael used to sit and read on Sunday afternoons. At 2:35, the students started to exit the building. They were easy to spot, young people with backpacks, talking loudly, laughing, with that carefree vibe only those who haven't faced real challenges in life have. And then I saw her. Dove Fernandez was undeniably a strikingly beautiful young woman. Her long, wavy brown hair flowed over her shoulders like a silky waterfall. Her golden skin spoke of days spent under the summer sun, and her slim, athletic figure reflected hours at the gym. She dressed with the casual elegance only a confident 20-year-old who knows she is desired can pull off. Right now, she's in her final year studying history at the University of Seville. She's supposedly living in the apartment Dad rented near the campus. How did you manage to find all that information? Dove and Dawn Rivers visited me almost every day with that maternal look of concern that was more painful than any comfort. My own daughters, turned into my caretakers, treated me like a fragile old woman who could break at any moment. It was a typical October Sunday in Seville, where the sun still warmed the stones of our Andalusian patio with a warmth known only to those who have spent their lives in southern Spain. I was in the kitchen preparing the Sunday paella, the same one we renovated 5 years ago with handcrafted tiles we bought in Triana. I lowered the heat under the paella pan and turned fully toward him. "I have met someone," he said. Words like bullets that he needed to fire quickly before losing courage. The world stopped. I literally felt time freeze in that instant. "She's young, Esperanza. Very young. She's 21 years old. Her name is Dove. 21. The same age as our oldest granddaughter, Dove's daughter." I felt as if the ground were opening beneath my feet, swallowing me whole. Dad left for a 21-year-old girl. He's lost his mind. Dove, always more composed, held me tightly and whispered, "Mom, we're going to get through this together, I promise you." But I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. It was a Tuesday morning when Dove came in with a proposal that would change everything. She entered the kitchen with that determination she had inherited from her father and stood in front of me with her arms crossed. All those nights we spent talking on the terrace, all the trips we took across Spain, all the little traditions we built together, it had all been a facade. "I'm going to move in with her," he announced as casually as if he were commenting on the weather. When my daughters arrived an hour later for Sunday lunch, they found me still sitting in the kitchen with the burned paella and my eyes swollen from crying. "Mom, what happened? Where's Dad?" asked Dove, my eldest daughter, as Dawn Rivers came over to hug me. I had to tell them the cruel truth of my life. I stood in the middle of the kitchen, watching the man with whom I had shared more than half of my life pick up his suitcase and head toward the door. 34 years reduced to a small brown leather bag. "And the girls?" I managed to ask as he stood in the doorway. "I'll tell them myself," he replied without looking back. Hope. If you want to discover the astonishing secret this young girl was hiding and how my life took a completely unexpected turn, subscribe to the channel and stay until the end. I promise you, this story will surprise you in ways you never imagined. It had been 2 months since Raphael left me for that girl. In just one afternoon, I lost not only my husband, but also the image I had of myself, my marriage, and my entire life. The first few weeks after Raphael left me were a hell I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. Every morning when I woke up, I would briefly forget what had happened, and then reality would hit me like a cold slap. We spent the next 3 hours going over everything we thought we knew about Raphael, his past, his jobs, those trips to academic conferences he took several times a year, his surprising fluency in several languages that he supposedly learned as a hobby, his unusual ability to navigate any city on the planet as if he had been there before. "Oh my God," I whispered, "that girl lives here." We waited for 2.5 hours, hidden in the car like a pair of amateur detectives. During that time, I watched several well-dressed people coming and going from the nearby houses. Clearly, this was a neighborhood inhabited by wealthy people of high social standing. I was going to go through Raphael's belongings. I got up with shaky legs and headed to his office, the space on the second floor that had always been his personal sanctuary. Throughout our years of marriage, I had respected that place without question. In one, he was Michael Rodriguez, in another, Roberto Martinez, and in a third, Richard Morrison, each bearing Raphael's photo, though with slightly different birth dates and various nationalities. My breath caught. What did this all mean? Why did my husband have multiple false identities? The room held his unmistakable scent, a mix of his cologne, old books, and the pipe tobacco he sometimes smoked when working late into the night. The walls were lined with shelves filled with books on medieval history, biographies of kings and emperors, and treatises on Gothic architecture. But when I opened the bottom right drawer, the deepest one, my hand touched something that shouldn't have been there, a thick folder hidden at the back, almost stuck to the bottom. My hands trembling, I pulled it out. It was a black leather folder without a label, heavy in my grip. Opening it, my world spun. I couldn't sleep because I felt a restless, cold, and logical fear telling me that Raphael hadn't gone off with a love-struck student. He had gone with someone who carried dangerous secrets. And if that woman had deadly secrets, what secrets was my own husband hiding? His academic record at the University of Granada exists, but the professors who supposedly taught him, some had passed away years before he was even there. What does that imply? It means that the identity of Raphael Morales was fabricated. Your husband exists on paper, but his background is false. And if neither of them is really who they claim to be, then this whole situation is far more dangerous than we had imagined. That afternoon, Dove used her contacts at the law firm where she worked to access official records. What she found left us frozen with fear. "Mom," she said to me on the phone, her voice trembling. Signs we had overlooked for decades because we trusted him completely. "Mom," Dove finally said, "if Dad isn't who he says he is, then young Dove isn't who she says she is either." I finished the sentence neither of us dared to say aloud. Exactly. 3 sleepless nights, filled with whispered phone calls and cautious glances every time we left the house, as if we were criminals running from something we didn't understand. Finally, I realized I couldn't live in uncertainty any longer. I needed answers, even if those answers destroyed the last pieces of the life I thought I knew. We went home in deep silence, both of us processing what we had just witnessed. I started with the desk, a massive oak piece we bought at an antique shop in Cordoba during our 10th wedding anniversary. The main drawers held what I expected: pens, exam papers, university bills, academic correspondence. I stayed awake until dawn began to creep through the blinds of our bedroom, tossing and turning in a bed that now felt too big and cold, replaying again and again the image of that elegant woman speaking in English with the young woman who had destroyed my marriage. Who was Dove Fernandez, really? That night, as I lay awake in the darkness of my room, a terrifying thought struck me. The man I had been married to for 34 years was a complete stranger. And if he was a stranger with a secret life, then his connection with Dove Fernandez wasn't just a simple love affair. But what grabbed my attention wasn't her beauty. It was something much more subtle and unsettling. There was something in her gaze, something in the way she moved, that didn't fit the image of a lovesick college student. "Mom, look at how she walks," Dove whispered beside me. I watched her expression shift from disbelief to concern and finally to fear. "Mom, that sounds like espionage," she whispered, as if saying the word aloud might summon unseen dangers right into our kitchen. "Don't be ridiculous, Dove. Your father is a university professor." It was where Raphael prepared his lessons, graded exams, and wrote his academic articles on medieval history. The door had never been locked. Raphael used to say that in a home built on trust, locks were unnecessary. Now I found that comment unbearably ironic. I entered the study and switched on the desk lamp. And how could a so-called college student live in a mansion worth more than everything Raphael and I had built together in all our years? But the questions that tormented me the most were darker and more unsettling. What did Raphael know about this situation? Dove Fernandez didn't head to the apartment Raphael had rented near the campus, as we had expected. Instead, she walked to a bus stop and took the line heading to the historic city center. We followed her by car, making sure to stay several blocks behind. Officially, Rafael Morales was born in Granada on March 15, 1964, but I found strange irregularities in his documentation. His birth certificate was issued when he was already 18 years old, not at the time of his birth. Rafael had always said he completed his mandatory military service at a base near Madrid, handling paperwork and assisting with administrative duties. He described it as so dull that it wasn't even worth mentioning. But this photograph showed a man clearly involved in something much more serious than just filing documents. Their conversation went on for about 10 minutes. The older woman seemed to be giving instructions, and Dove nodded occasionally, taking notes in a small notebook. Her body language had completely changed since she left the university. She looked professional, serious, as if she were receiving work instructions. After finishing her conversation, the older woman got into a black Mercedes with diplomatic plates parked in front of the house and drove away. Dove stayed on the sidewalk for a few minutes, looking at her phone before going back inside the mansion. She got off the bus at Plaza de Armas and from there went to one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in Seville, an area full of elegant homes and 19th century palaces where the true high society lives. "This doesn't make sense," my daughter whispered as we quietly parked at the end of the street. "That's what we've always believed," she replied with unwavering logic. "But if he has false identities, bank accounts in tax havens and military uniforms you don't recognize, then maybe he's not really a university professor. I need you to find out everything you can about your father, his military history, his background, any official records you can locate." My daughter looked at me as if I were out of my mind. "Dad, Mom, we know Dad's whole story." Who was the man I had been married to for over 30 years? My hands trembling more and more, I kept examining the papers. There were maps with strange routes marked, codes I couldn't decipher, and bank account numbers in countries Raphael and I had never visited together. Switzerland, the Cayman Islands, Luxembourg. It was no longer just a degrading affair. There was a much darker and more alarming layer to this whole situation. That night, for the first time in 2 months, I couldn't sleep because of something other than heartbreak. Inside were photographs, many photographs, and in all of them was Raphael, yet not the Raphael I thought I knew. In these images, he looked much younger, maybe in his 30s, in places he'd never mentioned, and with people he'd never introduced me to. One photo stole my breath. Raphael wore a military uniform I didn't recognize. "Have you been able to sleep at all?" "Dove," I said, letting myself slump heavily into a chair. "I need you to do me a huge favor. I need you to investigate something for me, using your legal contacts. What is it about?" Raphael, 25, seemed like the most sophisticated man I had ever met, with his measured way of speaking and his deep knowledge of history and literature. It was ironic that now, so many years later, I chose the same place to realize that everything I thought I knew about him was a lie. They spoke English with a perfect American accent, as if it were their native language. "Are you hearing this?" my daughter whispered as she rolled down the car window to listen more closely. I admitted I don't understand English very well, but that accent definitely didn't sound Spanish. My heart was pounding so hard I was afraid my daughter might hear it from the floor below. "Yes, sweetheart." I came down immediately. I tried to speak in a normal tone, but nothing felt normal. Absolutely nothing in my life felt right. When I got to the kitchen, Dove looked at me with concern. "Mom, you look very pale." The night after our discovery became one of the longest nights of my life. "That's strange," I murmured. "She moves like a dancer or a soldier." We decided to follow her at a discreet distance. My heart was pounding so hard I feared she might hear it from the street. After years of being the perfect wife, I had turned into an amateur spy, trailing my husband's lover through the streets of Seville. It was something far more complicated and dangerous, something that could cost us our lives. For 3 days after our discovery, Dove and I debated whether to confront Raphael or keep investigating in secret. If she's a student, what's she doing here? Houses around here cost millions of euros. Dove Fernandez stopped in front of an impressive 3-story mansion with a white marble facade and an impeccably manicured garden. She pulled some keys from her handbag and opened the front door as if it were her own house. It wasn't the Spanish Army uniform from his mandatory military service. This one was different, more ornate, with insignias I couldn't identify. Standing beside him were other men in uniform, all with the serious, alert expression I had seen on young Dove. "My God," I whispered, holding the photo under the lamp's light. The documents were so technical I didn't fully understand them, but I caught a few words: Operation Infiltration, Target Elimination. "Elena," I heard Dove's voice from downstairs. "Mom, are you okay? I came to have breakfast with you." I quickly shut the folder and put it back in the drawer. As I continued going through the contents of the folder, I found something even more unsettling. Documents in several languages: English, French, what looked like German, and others I couldn't identify. Some appeared official, like passports or IDs, but all with different names for Raphael. Was he truly an innocent victim of an enigmatic woman, or were there parts of my own husband that had remained hidden from me after 34 years of marriage? At 6 a.m., when the sun began to peek through the blinds, I made a decision I had never considered in over 3 decades together. At the bottom of the folder, I found something that made me feel like the floor was falling out from under me. Typewritten reports in English with the letterhead of what looked like a U.S. government agency. So I texted Raphael. "I need to see you. It's urgent. Café Central, Plaza de la Constitución, tomorrow at 11. His reply came an hour later. "Everything okay? Has something happened with the girls?" Even in his betrayal, his first concern was still our daughters. That gave me a flicker of hope, as if somewhere in the shadows of this nightmare there was still something of the man I had loved. "Just come," I replied. The Central Cafe was where we had our first date 36 years ago. I was 19, wearing my best navy blue dress. "Mom," my daughter said in a trembling voice, "this isn't normal. A college student doesn't live in a 2 million euro mansion. A college student doesn't take orders from women with diplomatic cars. And definitely, a Spanish college student doesn't speak American English as if it were her native language." Finally, Dove Fernandez came out of the mansion, but she wasn't alone. She was with an older woman, around 50, dressed in a suit that screamed wealth from a distance. Elegant, sophisticated, and exuding the authority of someone used to giving orders. What froze me was hearing their conversation. He was born in Granada, studied history at the University of Granada, served in the military, earned his doctorate, and began his teaching career. I didn't interrupt her. "We don't know anything, absolutely nothing." I told her about the photographs, the documents, the multiple identities. The young woman moved with an unusually steady posture, too deliberate for someone her age. This wasn't the carefree stride of a student, it was the walk of someone constantly alert, someone scanning their surroundings, measuring every step. It was the bearing of a person trained to always be on guard.